Welcome back to KJ Gets Kimchi.
I'm back.
Ooh, that's a pretty good segment title. KJ Gets Kimchi. I like it.
KJ's Kimchi
Corner. Spelled with a K.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Hella problematic.
I was about to say. Nothing wrong
KJ's
with
Korean Kimchi
with
Corner.
that acronym.
You're listening to the Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean, American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
What is up, Janchi people? We are back. Oh, my connection couldn't log you in.
Oh, maybe we're not back.
We might be okay. I'm still rolling, so it's all good. Janchi people,
Welcome.
we are back with another episode. This one is so fantastic. We've been blessed with a lot of authors on the show who have been able to come on. And this one, I feel like, I don't know about y'all, but I feel like our interview game and our just talking and podcasting game like goes up a level when we have authors on. Do you feel that also? Or are you just like, no, you're like, man,
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm just kidding. I think it does
all right,
go
so
up.
Nathan and
go up.
Patrick are like, here's the deal. I bring the same level of excellence every podcast. And I
Exactly.
listen, people, I may or may not bring the same level of excellence, but when there's authors on, I really try to ramp it up to mostly okay.
I thought you
So-
were very eloquent, KJ. So
I
how
just-
about that?
look,
Is that
okay,
what you?
so here's the deal.
Is that what it is? Is that what you want? You want some praise?
Anyways, so we have a fantastic interview with fellow Korean adoptee Jen Frederick, who is, as Patrick says, a prolific author. She's a USA Today bestseller, known for romance novels, and this one is unique and powerful and wonderful. It is called Heart and Soul, and so we had an advanced copy that we got to read, and we're all riveted. I think I'm safe in saying, having heard everyone talk about it, that this book is fantastic. We can't wait for y'all to be able to pick it up and get your own copy because, man, it is good. It is about a Korean adoptee who goes back to Korea and has adventures running around Seoul. And it is, yeah, I just think it's riveting.
I agree, and I'm not as many chapters in as KJ and Patrick. But it has already hooked me in. So I can see that right there is something that is telling of a good book. So
That book has plugged Nathan into the HDMI and is streaming in high def, baby, right to his brain. No, it is really a good book, and this conversation was really, really great. Really excited to share that, and really excited to just kind of chat about the book with you guys after the interview. So I think we should just roll it.
But before that, maybe we should explain for the new listeners what the Janchi Show is.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right.
So deep
Janchi
into the
Show.
You said that so disappointed. Ah.
No,
If you don't know
I'm not-
already,
I'm disappointed in myself.
yeah, you rolled in. You
I
rolled
was,
in.
yeah, I know. This is totally my bad.
You
know,
rolled
but
in
this
hot
is-
and right
this is
past
how
the stuff we normally do.
Yeah.
By the
This is
way,
how
I'm
we-
also one of your co-hosts, Nathan Noah.
God dang it! I'm the worst. Someone fire me.
You're hired.
I don't deserve to be here.
I think most people know who we are, but if you don't, I'm Nathan. That's Patrick. That's KJ. We are the Janchi Show.
They
Three
can only
Korean
hear us,
adoptees
though.
across
Well, I guess
the
that
Midwest.
still works, though.
That does kind of.
It does.
Yes.
But thank you for
Yes.
listening.
We're professional podcasters.
Even if it doesn't seem like it right now.
It doesn't seem like it. I'm the worst.
We're breaking
Anyways.
off another 10, too, and this
Yeah.
is in the 40s. Wait,
Fine,
no.
yeah, we are
No, it's
well
not.
on our way.
We don't do
I know
episode
what number
counts
it is.
anymore.
We're not
We don't
using
tell-
numbers.
we don't
We're not
say
doing
episode
numbers anymore.
numbers.
We don't count
If you're-
episodes, man. It's
If you're
lame.
listening on Apple Podcast, it says what episode number it is, and if you're listening anywhere else, it probably doesn't. So figure it out.
I think it does.
Anyways, Janchi is a Korean word that we translate as feast or celebration. And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to celebrate our Korean, American, human identities, basically, and just figure out what it is that makes us who we are. And we usually talk about the Korean adoptee experience. We talk about Korean culture. We talk about American culture. We talk about food. We talk about Korean food. We talk about books, which is what we're doing in this one. So here is our interview with Jen Frederick, whose new book, Heart and Soul, is released May 25th. That is Tuesday if you are listening to this on the release. You have 6 days. Go pre-order it. It's great. But let's roll into the interview with Jen Frederick right now.
Roll clip.
Sounded like a cat.
Yep.
Meow.
Meow. All right.
Meow.
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 Right now.
It's meow, but different.
It's meow.
It's N as in meow.
Right meow.
Meow.
Yeah. Okay.
Meow. Welcome back to the Janchi Show. We are here with prolific author and fellow Korean adoptee, Jen Frederick. Jen, thank you for joining us on the Janchi Show today. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on such short notice too.
Yeah, we had to put this together for the listeners. We had to put this together very quickly when we found out about the book that we're going to talk about that Jen is getting ready to release later. We knew that we had to get her on the show, especially during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And just the fact that I'm a prolific reader. I about said author. I've written nothing, written no books.
You've written a lot of Instagram posts,
Yeah, I
so that
know.
like almost counts.
Oh my gosh. Why do what's wrong with me? Because I love to read.
The first step for every author is being a prolific reader. So I see that in your future.
Oh,
Heyo.
okay. I'm taking that endorsement and running with it. But we're all very excited about this conversation today. Jen, we're going to kick this interview off the way we do all of our interviews and ask you to share as much or as little as you want about your adoption story.
So I was adopted at the age of 2 by a family in Wisconsin. They had already adopted 2 Caucasian babies and wanted to adopt more children, but were told that they would be at the back of the line because they had already had adopted 2 children. And so the Lutheran Social Services that they had worked with suggested foreign adoptions and put them in contact with Holt Adoption Agency. So that's how I got connected with my family. And I have another brother who's also Korean. He's not blood related, but obviously he's my brother nonetheless. And that's my story.
Cool. Where in Wisconsin?
So my family lives in River Falls, which is very close to the Twin Cities. So if you imagine the state of Wisconsin, there's this little point that points into Minnesota, and that's where I grew up.
Oh, cool. I have family in Door County.
Okay, so ways away.
Yeah, the opposite side, I guess.
She's like, so nowhere close to where I was just
And
talking
nowhere
about.
close. But I like Wisconsin. I love the cheese.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing
You
that with us.
cannot get good cheese curds anywhere. Can we put
Exactly.
this in the food section? You cannot get good cheese curds anywhere but Wisconsin. And they have to be wet and squeaky.
Yep.
Wait,
And-
wet and squeaky?
Squeaky.
Yeah, that's a measure of a good cheese curd.
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yep.
I did not know this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
and I feel like
you're
we
up
had
there.
a cheese curd conversation on the show before. Now I'm feeling like this is dredging up some memories of a cheese curd conversation that we once
I'm
had.
pretty sure we had a conversation about cheese curds
I
on
think
the
so.
show.
And then-
Probably with like melody.
And then ultimately, in the end, if you want to really go for it, you get the fried ones, which come with ranch. But that's
Oh, yo, those are delicious.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting off track.
I'm hungry.
We're getting off track.
Okay, yeah, sorry, Jen, this is your time, and we're
Off topic.
getting sidetracked by food. That's our bad.
Jen, tell us a little bit about growing up in River Falls, Wisconsin. What was the community like that you grew up in, and maybe what was your accessibility to Asian or Korean culture in that community?
Well, my brother and I were the only Koreans. I actually grew up in a really small town close to River Falls and then moved to River Falls when I was a little older. But my brother and I were the only Koreans, I believe, in that town. We might have been the only people of color in that town.
Yes.
And so my experience growing up was growing up with other white people. And as many adoptees know, that you want to fit in. And so it was challenging growing up looking different. And some of the things that I experienced, I had actually put in the story. And it wasn't really until I went to college that I saw people who looked like me other than my brother. Occasionally we would go to Minneapolis. They have a large Laotian community in Minneapolis, and they also had some other tangentially related Asians in that area. And there were Korean culture festivals that my mom took us to. But other than that, my interaction with other Asians, other than my brother, was almost zero.
So where did you then end up at college, where you were first able to kind of get immersed in a little bit more diversity?
Well, I went to Drake, which is in Des Moines, Iowa, which was not diverse either. I moved from one white community to another white community. I think I put this joke in my book, but when I had my daughter, I always said that I raised the percentage of Asians in my community by an entire percentage point.
Yeah.
So in my area, if I want to see other Asians, like I could go to the Asian grocery store, or I can get my nails done or my hair done. And that's primarily where I see other Asians.
So talk about your first moments then of when you really explored, or when you first were engaging with the AAPI community, or what was that moment for you post college even?
Gosh, not to any great extent. I went to Korea for the first time through the whole Motherland tour, and that was probably the first time that I had experience with other Asians on a more intimate level than running into someone in the grocery store. And they were all adoptees, obviously. So that was a really great experience. That might have been my first.
And what was that experience like for you going back that first time?
Oh, it was tremendous. Holt does a really good job of showing you different parts of Korea, and then meeting other adoptees and hearing their stories and their experiences was really precious. One of the other things that we did that stood out in my memory is that we went to the Salvation Army Women's Home in Seoul. And that is where young women from rural provinces will come because they're pregnant, and they tell their families back home that they're getting jobs in Seoul. And they'll have their babies, and they'll give their babies up for adoption. Now, when I went several years ago, they were clamping down on international adoptions. It's kind of a shameful part of Korean history that all these babies were exported. And so we were told that they hardly ever allow international adoptions anymore. And I think that's it's even harder today for an international person to adopt a Korean baby, although they do make exceptions for adoptees.
To adopt from Korea?
Yes, but more, they don't really have orphanages anymore in Korea that like they did when I was a baby and when my brother was a baby. They're like homes, and therefore children that they want to reintegrate into the families. So, most of the time people give up their babies because of, poverty, but other times it's because of, family disapproval. Single motherhood is still not very welcome in that culture. And blood is such an important concept for Koreans. I think it comes from our Confucius culture. It's very common for people to ask you what your blood type is. They believe that blood type tells you something about a particular person. And so the fact that you're not blood related to your family is problematic.
You saying that reminded me, I think it was a Netflix K-drama called Startup, where they referenced oh yeah, his blood type doesn't match his personality at all. And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, I thought that it was just like a fun BuzzFeed level, oh yeah, your blood type determines your personality, not like a deeply intrinsic, no, your blood type determines your personality. Kind of.
I don't know if everyone believes that, but it's certainly an important part of culture.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that we actually just talked about on our show in a as of yet unreleased, but by the time you're listening to this released episode, was kind of the Confucian roots and how important that is to Korean culture. And I definitely get that mental juggle of our culture, their culture, and then, like trying to figure out like how do I like I am from there, but I'm not like from yeah. So yeah, but it was just interesting, and I love that that you even bring that up in the story of your book. But yeah, just kind of that weird nuance of like dealing with Confucianism, but then also being kind of a postmodern society, and how all of that, I think, conflicts in Korea as a nation as much as it conflicts in us as Korean adoptees who grew up in America.
Yeah, we're definitely different people, Korean adoptees, than native Koreans, motherland Koreans, and I think they view us very differently as well. I went back with my family, my daughter, my husband, in 2000 and the pandemic has kind of screwed me up, so I don't time, and I think it was 2018 or 2019 that I went, just recently. And people expect me to speak Korean, and because I look Korean, I am Korean, and I had to explain to everyone, well, I'm adopted, but I don't even think that was a very good excuse for them.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you've been back multiple times, and you still, each time you go back, are getting that question of, why don't you speak Korean? You know, I think that we talk about language all the time and how like powerful it is, and being kind of at a loss, especially Nathan. Well, me, I was going to say Nathan and I, but I will say me and not speak for Nathan. But when it comes to that, when it comes to that barrier, just trying to get over that hurdle, you know, and I haven't even been back to Korea yet. So what is it like to have to field that question kind of over and over again each time you go back? Does that jade you at all in that journey, or is that just part of it? Is that just part of the journey that we all take as adoptees when we go back?
Yeah, I think I feel a lot of chagrin. My daughter learned Korean by watching Strong Woman Do Bong Soon probably 50 times. And she can actually speak it pretty well. And we were just using her as a translator most of the time. And she makes fun of my pronunciation because I can only speak it really slowly. And my pronunciation, she says, sounds like a computer. And there's nothing natural about it.
Your daughter has no mercy.
No,
this is totally how I feel my son's going to do the same thing to me someday, because he's in Taekwondo right now, and he's counting the numbers, and he's counting 1 to 10 faster than I can right now. So it's, yeah. And he's 5. So it's I want to be able to speak it better so that I can communicate when I'm there. I plan to go back more often. Eventually, I plan to live there maybe 6 months out of the year. Oh, wow. If you haven't gone, it's an amazing experience, because even though you don't speak the language, everyone looks like you. And it's hard to explain this to people like Caucasians who live in this world where everyone already looks like them. Yeah.
But when you go to Korea, everyone looks like you. Everyone has your facial features. And it's not that we all look alike, but you see yourself reflected back in their phenotypical characteristics. And it's a familiar landscape that you haven't been in before. The very first time I went to Korea, I was with my husband, and we were in the Ewha Women's University District. And there's a really big slope in there down where the shopping is. And it was really crowded that day. And my husband is 6'2", and he's Caucasian and stands out like a sore thumb. But I look like everyone else there. And he was like, don't go too far away from me. I'm afraid I won't find you, because it's just a sea of black hair. And it's an amazing experience. So even though I don't speak the language, and even though most people look at me strange anytime I open my mouth, it was still just really wonderful to be there. And my husband, when we went back in 2019, said he felt awkward, and he could feel like everyone was staring at him. And he said he wanted to wear a hat. And it was just interesting, because he was having that feeling of being othered that I feel all the time here in America.
Yep.
So I hope that you all go back if you haven't, because it's really an amazing experience for you. I think you will find it amazing.
I'm the only one that has to go back still, but
Okay.
planning on it.
Yeah, I went back 3 years ago, but yeah, it is amazing. Like you were saying, it's almost a little surreal too, just because it feels different than I've been to other Asian countries. I've been to Japan and China and Thailand and stuff like that. But going to Korea, still,
it's like I've been to all of the continents.
I've been to the
many
other
percentages
ones.
of all of
I'm
the
just
countries and all
building
the
reference
continents.
here.
I've been to Hawaii many times. I love Hawaii. All right, Nathan, take it easy.
Yes. They give me a lot of crap about things like that. But yeah, it is an amazing country, and being there definitely felt different than all the other trips I've taken other places. But in addition to that, I was also there meeting my biological family, so that might have had other things to do with it as well. But yeah, I can relate to that it is something I want to come back to for sure.
So we got an advanced copy of your book, Heart and Soul. It's Seoul, like the capital of Korea, Seoul. And it is released on May 26th. And just reading through it, I found it so striking when your main character's Korean friend, who is an international student, I believe, describes how Korea is. And you write, there was this pause, and then she just says, beautiful. And I felt the weight of that. And I think part of it for me might be because I know that you're an adoptee writing about Korea, but there was just a level of weight that I was like, oh man, that I felt it. And I think, Nathan, that you feel it too, having been back, that maybe it's just the mental weight of knowing that you are back where you came from. Maybe it is, I think Korea is a beautiful country, but there is kind of this unique emotional weight to Korea is a beautiful place. And then reading like little descriptions in Heart and Soul about your main character, Hara, forgetting that she was Korean until she looked in a mirror and was like, oh yeah. And then even reading when she meets the guy who she mistakes as the driver when she lands in Korea.
Hey, spoiler alert, sir.
I love
Nathan's not that far yet.
Okay,
come on.
Look, it's in the blurb, I think.
It is. I think it is.
I was like, I haven't read the blurb, so it's all spoiler territory. But I guess it's called experiencing a new book, Nathan.
No,
anyway,
it's true, Nathan.
No, so
I'll
I
read
was just
faster, I swear.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed is, as I have read more books by Asian and Asian American authors, is being able to hear my body type described and like my face described. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. And so I think what's incredible about Heart and Soul is it is incredibly detailed and vivid. And as an adoptee, especially, I'm like, oh yeah, I relate to that. I relate to this. I relate to this. Like just so many specific, like hyper specific moments that are either like, I remember thinking that thing, or I remember feeling this way, or I remember that type of comment being said to me. It's such a wonderful thing to read this story, just the little bit that I've gotten into it, and be like, oh man, there's so much of me in the story. It's really moving and wonderful. What was the process? Because you're not, I don't know. Again, I haven't read the blurb, but it doesn't yet strike me as a romance book. So if it is a romance book, then forget that. But as a
Tell
romance,
us the blurb.
as a romance author writing about an adoptee experience going back to Korea, how much of this was, I don't know, I guess, was the process different for you writing this book than other books that you've written?
It was actually really hard. And it's not like I haven't had hard books to write before, but when I write romance books, they're really kind of frothy and escapism. Like one of the books I wrote with a friend of mine features a hitman who wants to retire, and he goes to college and he falls in love with this girl at college. So it's like, they're fantastical type stories.
Uh-huh.
So this story was grounded in a lot more realism for me, and included a lot more of my personal experiences and emotions. I definitely put more into the story of a personal nature than I've ever written before, and that's really hard.
How much of yourself do you feel like you translated into the story or that you wove into these pages?
I think the experiences of being adoptee is what I translated into the story, but Hara is nothing like me. And I think she's more interesting. And when you're a writer, you get to create the type of character that you want to see on the page. And so Hara was the type of, she had to be a certain way to fit the story. But her adoptee experience was my adoptee experience because I was writing from my own personal experiences. And KJ, it's really heartwarming to hear that you identified with it, because I was afraid that when other adoptees would read this story, they would say, well, that's not my experience, and I don't appreciate this person trying to universalize an adoptee's experience, because that's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to write one story about one person's adopted experience, because everybody's stories are different. And I think that their stories and the way that you relate to adoption and how you treat it is different. The way that I viewed adoption at the age of 12 and the age of 18 and the age of 28 and the age of 38, totally different.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same as KJ. There's a lot of things just in the 2 chapters that I read about relatable instances and occurrences and things that are said and the way she felt. I mean, again, you say it's very true. Not everyone's story is the same, but there are definitely parts of what you've put in already that are relatable to other adoptees, I think. Even though if it's not all of it, the whole story, it's certain things like feeling like more comfortable when another Asian is in the room. Just one other Asian can be in the room, and you can feel a little more comfortable. The parts that you talked about, I did the exact same thing. There was a moment in the story I was talking about where she didn't have the Korean keyboard installed on her phone, and I've had that situation where I was trying to write something and I didn't have it. I was like, and I have to go download it. And so little things like that, they're just little minute things in the story that I was like, oh, that's great. That's totally something I've done. So I really appreciated coming across those, because it definitely connected me more to the story and to the character.
And for me, 100% agree and resonate with everything that KJ and Nathan said, just about feeling connected to the story. And another way, and you talk about, that fear of universalizing the adoptee experience in this book. Just from my perspective and the chapters that I've read, I don't get that feeling at all. If anything, I feel like Hara's experience is inviting me in to experience an aspect or a perception of the adoptee lived experience. It doesn't feel pushed on me. If anything, it feels more inviting and more inclusive. Just the way that the story is written and progresses, and specifically where we find her at the beginning. I think the way that her relationship with her adoptive mother, the way that you laid that out it really hit home for me, because I have that same kind of like push pull with my mom. And especially when she is in Korea and having those messages that she's having back and forth in like chapters, I think it's like 8 and 9, just like not responding in time or anything like that, and worrying about that perception and how she's going to feel about doing certain things. I totally resonated with that. Yeah, I guess I don't even know if I had a question. I don't think that I did, but I just wanted to reinforce and reaffirm the fact that the way that the story comes off to me does not any way feel like a universalization, or like you're co-opting other adoptees' experiences or saying this is how the adoptee experience is. I think it's much more inclusive.
So right there, before the book is even released, you have 3 Korean adoptee confirmations that
we should have wrote that down and put it on.
This is a great book.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no way to turn audio into words. That's awesome.
I have to ask one thing though. You said there's not too much. There's certain things that are relatable to you that you can use as your story with Hara's story, I guess. that's not necessarily your story, but I have to ask, did you cry at the Notebook?
I did not. I'm going to make a big confession here. I have actually not even seen the Notebook.
Oh, with you.
Wow.
That's probably a bigger confession for you than it is for like me, but I'm with you in solidarity. So
I'll tell you that in the romance community, we do not consider Nicholas Sparks a romance author because the key component of a romance is a happy ending.
Interesting. That's the hot goss from the romance.
Yeah, there you go.
Just hot takes.
We're breaking.
We're getting insider information. I like this.
I don't even know if Nicholas Sparks considers himself a romance author.
That's fair.
Probably not.
So I have a question. I did actually think of the question that I wanted to tag at the end of that. So this being a book out of your normal wheelhouse, so of the stories that you normally tell and write, what does it mean to you to be releasing this during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and to tell your story, even though, like you said, Hara is not the same as you, but it is your adoptee experience. What does it mean to be able to share this story during this month where we're celebrating not only ourselves but our culture, and to do that as an adoptee, to be so vulnerable and to release this piece of art during this time?
Well, I'll tell you a little history about this book. It was supposed to be released a year ago, and the pandemic happened, and there was this huge flood of anti-Asian rhetoric, and my publishers thought that maybe it wasn't the best time to release this story. And I don't know if today is the best time to release this story, because the anti-Asian wave seems to have swelled as a result of the seeds that were sown a year ago and many, many years ago. But I will say that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would not have believed that this story could even be published, because there weren't these types of stories being published. And the idea that I could write a story about a Korean going to Seoul and having the entire book set in Seoul is pretty amazing to me. So I'm thrilled and honored that I can have this space to share this story, whether it's an AAPI month or, any other month. And I'll tell you, it shows you how ignorant I am. I didn't even know there was an AAPI month until like 2 years ago.
Hey, you're in the same boat as us.
Yeah. We are discovering new months every year.
I didn't even know that there was a Korea until about 6 months ago.
New Korean holidays that we never celebrated. I mean, this is definitely something that we have. I'm going to steal a question that I know Patrick was going to ask. So, was there moments of while writing this book about culture that you had to look up or that you didn't know about? Because there's a lot of things that I felt that were in there that were very specific. And as a lot of Korean adoptees, we don't know these types of nuances or little things. Did you do research, or these things that you learned while you went on your personal trips to Korea?
I've done a lot of research. I watch a lot of Korean vloggers because you can get kind of a day-to-day feel for their lives. I mean, obviously it's a pretty glamorized version of their lives. I read the Korean Herald. I think it's the Korean Herald, isn't it?
Yeah, Korean Herald.
Every day.
Yeah.
And there's some really interesting stories. I don't want to spoil the second book. For your listeners, Heart and Soul is part one of a 2-book series.
What? Okay.
Now I feel spoiled
Barely
on the
next
end of
I'm
this book.
already
I'm like,
amped for book 2.
I already know I'm going to be left on a cliffhanger when I finish this now.
Yeah.
Man.
So I had a part of the story in book 2 features the names of the subway stops in Korea. And there was a really cool article in, I believe it was the Korean Herald, and I'm sorry Korean press if I'm getting it wrong. But I'm putting it in the acknowledgement, so I'll get it right at some point. But it talked about the Korean etymology of all of the subway stops and how they all got their names from specific characteristics of that region. And I thought it was really cool. So for like Yeongseong, which is part of kind of like the Central Seoul business area, Yeong is the name of the Korean word for dragon, right? And dragon is the symbol of the king. So the dragon throne, the dragon on the robes. The myth is that someone saw a dragon one morning over the Han River because it overlooks the Han. So that they call it Yeongseong. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but each one of the subway stops has that kind of story behind it. And so I've read a lot about these things, and I tried to incorporate as many unique Korean things that I could without being overwhelming, to give that kind of feeling of place, so that when you read the story, you would feel like you were there and you were learning something about Korea, because I love the country and I want other people to love it.
Yeah, I think that your love for the country really shines through. And I think it's so fun reading it. Like, I'm not like a huge romance reader. I have read a couple of them. But like, what I think is so fun about this, and I think partially, so part of my kind of every year promise to myself is I'm going to get better at Korean, right? And so this year in particular, along with doing the Janchi Show, my wife and I have been really dedicated at kind of watching a K-drama as like kind of every third show that we watch, right? And so I'm curious I have two questions that are hopefully quick and easy, or fun at least. Did you have to watch a lot of K-dramas in like thinking through this book? Like, because even as I was reading it and you have romanization of Korean, I was like, I know that word, this is fun. I know that word, this is fun. I don't know that word, that's fun. So I had to like figure out how to like Google that because it's in romanized Korean, and then I had to translate, whatever. But did you watch a lot of K-dramas as a part of your research, or as a part of your quote unquote research, aka just you live in your life? Do you have a favorite K-drama or one that you would recommend? Or are you like sick and tired of K-dramas, never want to watch one again?
I love K-dramas. In fact, I almost exclusively only watch K-dramas, and I have probably for the last, 5 years.
Wow.
And so my love for K-dramas is partly how I came up with this book.
Yeah.
So I do have favorites, but one that I would recommend with caution is Mother. It's not the movie, but there's a K-drama and it's super emotional and it's about adoption. And I had a hard time watching this K-drama, but it's so good and I'm glad that I did, and I would recommend it. Just know that it's pretty emotional if you're an adoptee. My family watched it with me and they were like, every episode we're all like on the verge of tears. But it's really good. So other dramas that I love would be, I love the police procedure dramas, so like Stranger, Signal, The Good Detective. I thought Sky Castle was really engrossing. I hated the ending. I felt like the ending ruined the drama.
So what I'm hearing you say is they really Nicholas Sparks did, huh?
No. More like romance book did. It just didn't fit. I'm all for happy endings and stuff, but I felt like it didn't fit.
So Jen, as far as the book goes, and again, you said it's a series. Other things, I think I wanted to ask one question that went back before the book, was more about your adoption. Are there things that you're doing about adoption or the adoption community that you're getting into more so, either because you're writing these books, or just because in your own personal life you're discovering more things and researching more things?
I think I'm connecting with people more online than locally. There aren't as many adoptees locally. But I also am rediscovering like being Korean through my daughter. She's a older teen. So that has actually been something that we've bonded over. She's picked out a Korean name. She actually, like I said, speaks Korean better than I do. She wants to study in Korea at least a year in college. And so we're kind of rediscovering Korea together, and that's been really wonderful.
That's awesome.
So, Jen, I had one other question that I wanted to ask you, especially you've just kind of walked us through how you went from River Falls to writing this book and being in Korea and embracing that and getting ready to really put your story on display in a major way. Something you wrote on your guest forum, something that you really related to or that stuck out to you in terms of like the things that we talk about for Korean adoptees on the show was the journey of self-love. So I wanted to ask you where you with this book coming out, where you feel you are at right now in your journey of self-love as an adoptee as this gets ready to release.
Wow, what a question. I shouldn't have put that on my form. Just kidding. I'll tell a very personal story here because we're all adoptees, and I think that people who would listen might be able to relate to this. On the flight back to America with my other fellow adoptees during my first Korea trip, we were all in our early 20s, and some of us were married and some were not. But one of the things that I had never wanted to do was have children because growing up was really painful. And I didn't want my daughter to go through that, or my child to go through that. And this was actually the very same thing these other female adoptees had experienced as well. They didn't want to have kids. And just hearing that with them was kind of a relief. Ironically, two of us got pregnant shortly after our trip to Korea. But it was really through my daughter, I feel like, that I've come to gain an appreciation for being Korean. I used to say to my daughter, gosh, I'm really glad that you don't look Korean. And she told me how much that was hurtful for her. And you had to realize that this kind of self-loathing that you had adopted because you wanted to fit in with your peers had worn down your self-esteem and your identity. And going back to Korea and learning about the history and learning about how many times that they have been invaded and rose up again made me really proud to be Korean. And having this like Korean Renaissance through BTS and Parasite and K-beauty and the food and all of that has made it easier for me to embrace my heritage. And with having a companion, my daughter, do it with me, and then also finding other people who are really into Korean culture has been heartwarming. I remember when I went to the movie Crazy Rich Asians, and you asked me if I cried when I watched The Notebook. I did not. And I didn't cry during Crazy Rich Asians, but I did tear up at the end when everybody in the theater in Iowa was clapping, because here were other white people celebrating. And I'm not Chinese, obviously, but I felt like I was being represented on screen and that there are people that don't look like me who said horrible things to me when I was younger. We're celebrating people who look like me. And that has been a real difference maker in my journey to self-love.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, talking about representation and seeing that happen, it makes a difference. And I don't know, I mean, for me anyways, obviously I can't speak for really one more than myself, but like, I didn't even know that I needed representation until it happened. Until I saw specifically an episode of Kim's Convenience where their cousin from Korea comes over and like the daughter is feeling super insecure about how Korean she isn't because she grew up in Canada. And so then they go to a Korean restaurant and she's like, I'm going to try to order in Korean. And they're like, I'll just talk to you in English. It's fine. You know, whatever. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, like I know that is deeply me. I know what it feels like to feel so insecure in your identity. And then to, to feel that and pass that on. And and, you know, hearing your story, I'm reminded of the importance of knowing your history and how finding people who look like you and being brave enough to have a relationship with that person. You know, there's a lot of difficulty as an adoptee. From what I've heard, there's a lot of difficulty just as an Asian American to have a relationship with another Asian American. And the more that I have been able to accept myself and read stories, been able to give myself that representation, makes me take one more step into loving myself more, into being more gracious with myself, and into seeing that our story as Asian American adoptees isn't all that different from Asian Americans in general. And that there is a lot more that unites us than I originally thought. And I'm so glad. I know that you talked earlier about maybe this isn't the right time to release the book, because that there is this, what seems like this rising tide of anti-Asian hate in America. But for me as an Asian American, I need something to celebrate. I need something to be happy about and to be proud about. And then to add the 1-2 punch of you being an adoptee and me being an adoptee, that's like summiting Mount Everest for me. It's like a thing that I never thought would be possible. And so I am so happy and so excited that I almost said sad. I don't know why, but I'm so happy and I'm so excited that this book is coming out, that it's coming out in May in APAHM, which is, I think, somewhat of a new celebration for the four of us. But hopefully will be a thing that we continue to celebrate, that we continue to be loud and proud about. So thank you so much for doing the brave and hard work of learning to love yourself and of celebrating your identity in a book form so that the rest of us can celebrate with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's wonderful. I hope that it does serve that purpose for a few people.
Yeah, I absolutely could not agree more, especially as an adoptee. You know, I was thinking the same thing. You said, not sure if now is the right time. And, you know, just from my experience over the past year, we're three adoptees who have started to tell their story. So many of us are now doing that, and we are still clamoring and searching for those things that represent us and those things that we can see ourselves in. So I would say that there couldn't be a more perfect time for this book to come out right now. And I am so excited to finish it, and a little bit less excited that I'm going to have to wait for part 2.
Yeah.
So I had to throw it out there. Now that I know that.
Well, book 2 is coming out in December, so...
Not
Perfect.
that far.
Oh, that's great. That's great news.
Perfect.
There's hope, everyone.
Yeah. See?
Hold on just a little bit longer.
Even though we are not, originally romance novel readers, I think you're going to pull in a lot of Korean adoptees and change their minds. I think a lot of people are going to start reading and relating, and probably you might get more messages on Facebook now too from it. So you said you're already starting to connect with more Korean adoptees. I think this is another way that you may start that process as well.
Well, I welcome anybody to message me.
Perfect. And that is a perfect lead into where can people find you at? Where can people follow you? Where can they send you messages? And also, how do we buy this book?
So the book actually comes out on May 25th, which is Tuesday of next week. So you should be able to buy it at Barnes & Noble or your Indie, or order it on Amazon. You can get me on Instagram or Twitter. I'm way more active on Twitter, although I probably reply to my messages once a day. Before we started, I had to download Zoom, so that's how often I'm on that. So Jen S. Fred on Twitter, and I think it's Jen Frederick on Instagram. Come find me. I actually have a Clubhouse, but I don't use it, so I don't even know how I would get messages there.
Well, we found you on
I don't know
Facebook
that
too.
You can't.
Yeah, you have a little fan club on Facebook, so we followed that one as well.
Oh gosh.
We're gonna help that fan club
Yeah, we're
grow.
gonna boost the numbers. It's up to like 12,000 or something. So it's not a small one, I guess. I shouldn't say small.
I wrote a really successful series under a different name with a friend of mine. So I think that's where a lot of the readers came from.
Well, you have 3 new readers here, and cannot wait. Heart and Soul, again, that is May 25th, next Tuesday, which is tomorrow. Wait, no. Yeah, the next Tuesday, right, for when this is releasing. Correct.
Okay,
Sorry, I forgot.
Like 10 days. I guess today's the 14th, so I guess it's 11 days.
Oh, yeah, because this will come out next Wednesday. So it would be next Tuesday. So it was correct.
The book is coming out Tuesday. Go get it. Go pre-order it. Go get the book.
Or wait 6 more days.
The book is coming out Tuesday, May 25th. It is Heart and Soul. The author is Jen Frederick. Jen, thank you so much for being here with us. We cannot wait for everybody else to get their hands and their eyes and their minds around this book. And we will be right back with a little bit more.
This month and every month, Penguin Random House invites readers to uplift AAPI stories and hashtag Read Asian Authors. From books like Kathy Park Hong's vital new essay collection, Minor Feelings, An Asian American Reckoning, to Kevin Kwan's irresistible beach read, Sex and Vanity, to Ocean Wong's lyrical letter, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and Korean American adoptee Jen Frederick's upcoming Heart and Soul. We're celebrating the stories that make us laugh, cry, and feel seen. Uplift your stories by AAPI authors that you love by sharing them on social media using hashtag ReadAsianAuthors. Throughout the month of May, Penguin Random House is donating 15% of their site profits to Asian Americans advancing justice, up to $30,000. Find your next read at penguinrandomhouse.com or go to bit.ly/ReadAsianAuthors.
We are back. Wonderful, incredible interview with Jen Frederick, and I'm really excited to dig into the book with you guys a little bit more from what we've read so far. We aren't doing a food. We're just going to talk today and go over the book. So before we had to restart this whole recording, we were talking to Nathan. I had asked you, since you had read, since you're not as far along as KJ and I are yet.
Not that it's a competition.
Yeah. Wondering what your impressions are of the book so far, especially after our conversation with Jen.
Yeah, no, I said it in the interview a little bit, but I really, out of all the books I've read, I instantly connected to this book and related to a lot of what was said, even in the short amount of chapters I had started reading already. And I don't think I've done that with any other book. I mean, a lot of books you read are, oh, this is informational, or that sounds like it's a good character development or something like that. But the way that this book did it was for me as a Korean adoptee, it just really resonated already. That I was like, oh, this sounds very similar to my story, or very similar to some of the stories that we've heard on our show already. And that right there, that hooked me in almost instantly. And it definitely is going to be, I hate to put myself on blast, but there's multiple times where I have read some of a book and not finished it. And so I feel like I don't want to do that with this one. I want to keep reading, and I want to keep going with it to read the whole thing, even though I'm a slow reader, as we have made comments about.
Nobody's timing you.
I may not finish it until, much later than you guys, but
2023.
But I do want to finish it because of those reasons, and because of just relating and seeing how it all turns out. It's been really, really, great to have this out there.
I think it's impressive that you stop reading books that you don't like and don't finish them. I feel like it's way harder. I don't know. I feel like a lot of the book readers that I know are like, oh my God, I hate this book, but I have to finish it, So I think it's more impressive that you're just like, no, I don't like it. End reading, For me, we talked about this briefly in the interview, and I didn't have a chance to really jump in, but I think the way that Jen writes the character of Hara, which is the main character, is so hyper specific. It feels really grounded, and it feels like it is just one adoptee's story, and I know that, she had said she was concerned that she didn't want her story to be a universalization of the adoptee experience at all, that Hara's journey was not meant to be representative of everyone's journey. But I think the thing that's so lovely about this book, and the thing that I really gravitated towards, Nathan, like you, is because it's so hyper specific, because it's so rooted in a reality that is parallel to Jen's own story, I'm assuming, just in some of those adoptee experiences, it feels really real, and it feels really honest, and it feels like just grounded in a way that, like, it's fiction, but there's something more. There's something that goes deeper than just a fun story, a fun travel around Seoul, a fun setup to a book too. I'm so angry that we have to wait, but I just think it does such a wonderful job there. And I loved, being able to talk to Jen after having read a little bit, that all the things that I was feeling about the book, about the way I think that Jen approached talking about Korea and a Korean culture and things like that, it wasn't just myself reading that into the story, but that's something that she had put into the story as well. The love of Korea and the love of the Korean culture, and I think all of her research and personal experiences really shine through in a way that makes Korea for me, it feels very much like a really fun slice of life that is still fantastical. It is romanticized in all meanings of the word, but just feels so rooted and feels so unique. It feels like I'm going to Korea, in lieu of being able to travel and really spend some time there, just among some friends, among having adventures or whatever. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I was feeling very similar to UKJ in the fact that it didn't, to me, feel like a universalized take. It very much felt like an individual story that I'm reading that was like welcoming in the way that it's written and the way that Jen approaches writing for this specific book, and Hara in particular, just feels very welcoming. Particularly the way she writes her inner monologue and the way she moves through a scene between dialogues. I feel like that really resonated with me because I feel like that's how I move through life. And so when she's in Korea and going through and experiencing Korea as an adoptee for the first time, that's what, I'm like, those are the questions I think I would be asking, or these are the feelings that I would be feeling, either like the anxiety of not knowing what these signs are, or just trying to navigate that everyday conversation, and that's something else that Jen had touched on too, was the language and how every time she goes back, she's like, somebody's like, oh, you don't speak Korean, and just trying to figure that out. And so I thought that's what I really resonated with the most, was just how very much myself of it was captured, but it didn't feel like she was telling my story. It does very much feel like I was reading and reaching out into a different space.
Yeah, and I wonder if, I just recently saw a thing where I think this person was or is a Korean adoptee, but the way that she was describing the adoptee experience of someone living in Korea did feel very well, this is what all Korean adoptees who end up living in Korea think. And I was like, is it though? So I say that having experienced what it feels like to have our stories universalized, to be part of a supposed monolith, it's kind of like when somebody leads in with well, my BIPOC friend says this, therefore all BIPOC people must say, and you're well, that doesn't track at all, 0%, so yeah, I just appreciated that hyper attention to detail that I think really makes it come alive.
Yeah, I'm curious on that storyline with when she goes to Korea and everything. I haven't got to that part yet, but I'm curious when you
spoiler
eventually.
Alert, it happens.
Yeah, well, it's in the blurb, right?
It's in the blurb that we've all read.
We confirmed.
Yeah.
But I know, also not a spoiler alert, but Patrick has not been to Korea yet. But we talk about Patrick going to Korea someday.
What if that was a spoiler for Patrick?
Wait, what?
What? I haven't
only
been?
In my dreams.
So when you do eventually go, Patrick, I'm curious if there's going to be moments while you're going around doing something, you're like, oh, that's very similar to Hara and what she experienced, or something in the book. I wonder if
there's
a
moment of deja vu, but wait a minute, Hara experienced this. I'm having a heart and soul moment right now.
Well, that's
Are you kidding me?
That's the thing. I think one of those things, and because I've had this conversation or heard this from people who've been back to Korea, is how mountainous it is. And so something that I think of, or that I've been thinking about, that she's talking about super mundane, but she just describes where she stays in Korea. This flat is up so many flights of stairs. And each time she goes back to the apartment, she talks about the journey up the stairs. And I just because of everything that I've heard about the climbing, especially for women having to wear heels. But like, I think that's something like those really simplistic things, those simple things you wouldn't think about, is one of the reasons I really love the book and the description of Korea, because it is, like I said, very accessible. And then it's like, it breaks down those little moments of like, oh, I got to walk up all these stairs. And then realizing when I get to Korea and coming from flat Indiana, being like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And I'm already a sweater, as we've established, and that will not be good.
Okay, we also have established that you also work out in the morning, so you should be good. So.
We haven't established either of those things on this particular recording of the episode.
Oh, well, hey, everyone, spoiler alert. Patrick works out more than KJ and I. There we go. Now it's there.
I think KJ actually works out more than me because of Sarah.
He's making sure he's going to fit into his tux.
If I could work out by watching Sarah work out, then I would work out more than anyone else on the planet.
It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Osmosis is only water, obviously.
Well, aren't you 90% water? I don't know.
No, we're like 70-something%. I don't know. Anyways.
Funny.
So that's kind of our first impression of the book Heart and Soul by Jen Frederick. It is available Tuesday. So go pre-order it. I know pre-orders help book sales a lot. So go pre-order it and then pick it up. It's available on IndieBound and a couple of other places as well if you want to pre-order it online. It's also available on like the major retailers if you want to use a major retailer, or if you want to support a local bookshop, do that. You know, we would recommend one thing over the other, but live your life.
And let us know what you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
We'd love to hear what everyone thinks about it, and put it on our page, on our comments, or we really enjoy hearing from other people actually kind of experiencing some of the things that we're experiencing. So not just listening.
Maybe we'll start like a mega thread in our Facebook group so we can talk about Heart and Soul. We have a mini thread going on in our Facebook group about Liverpool Football Club. So
I'm not part of that one.
And about books in general,
but it's really gratuitous for me. I'm like, oh yes, this is fun.
I'm not heading up the book club. I know that. So
I was going to say that'll be the start of this thread on Heart and Soul could be the start of our Janchi book club. if anyone wants to join besides us three.
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't, were you going to say one more thing, Patrick? Sorry, before we plug our names and our emails.
No. I think I was going to say that Jen's website is also linked down here in the show notes. So if you aren't 100% sure where to go get the book, click that link and you will be able to go find that out. So that was my addition. That was it. All right, you're done talking, and we're going to close the show now.
Yeah, sorry we didn't have a food, but I think we really just wanted to talk about this book, and we'll get back to our food and drink items later for future episodes. Because the other boys just got a nice little delivery package of some hot items that we are going to try. So it'll be back.
They are very hot.
They're not hot at all.
They're so hot. They're so hot. They're melting. I don't know.
Anyways,
no sense.
Speaking of that, we are so hot because you can find us. We are so hot on the internet. You can find us at all of the hot places that is social media.
We're talking AOL Instant Messenger. We're talking Zanga. We're talking
MSN
Yahoo.
We might have a MySpace page somewhere.
You can download our episodes off LimeWire,
Friendster,
and Napster.
Off Napster.
You're bringing Napster back.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can find us at all those places at Janchi Show. You can send an email to us at janchishow@justlikemedia.com. You can go to janchishow.com and find a whole bunch of things to do. If you type in that URL and put /support, you can find out all the ways that you can support the show. There are a lot of different things. And is there anything else? No, I think that's all the places that you can get a hold of us.
You can support the show by leaving us a rating or review, by telling a friend, by posting about it on social media. Really, honestly, especially in like entertainment and for books and things, the more that you talk about a thing that people are like, oh, hey, this is a good thing. So we may not have quite the power yet to get things trending, but honestly, even in your small world, just talking about a thing a lot goes a long way to supporting an artist or a producer, content producer, whatever. So talk us up, talk up Jen Frederick, talk up everybody that you want to support out loud. That's important.
That is important.
And this is the end of APIHM month as well. So we're almost done.
No, we have another week.
You have one more week?
This episode comes out, yeah.
Oh. Okay, take that out then.
We got one more week. And +1. Add the +1 in there. Anyways, you can find me at Patrick in the World on Instagram and at P Armstrong anywhere else.
You can find me in my basement.
Bottle full of bub. No.
You can also, find me on Instagram and Nowak, or my photography one at Nowak Photo.
I was just thinking about how sad it is that we only ever interact with you when you're in your basement. It's like, oh man, what a sad life Nathan lives. Anyways,
okay.
Send Nathan a message if you want to help him escape the monotony of his basement. Yeah, maybe we'll start a fundraiser on Buy Me a Coffee that'll just called "Get Nathan Out of the Basement."
Just wait, I'm gonna create a special podcast room one of these days. It's gonna have like a secret door. It's gonna open.
I mean, if it's still in the basement,
the
it's still in the
door,
basement.
it's a hidden podcast.
It's a hidden podcast room. It's gonna be a floating double door. No, I don't know.
Yikes. All right. Anyways, you can find me at KJ Relke wherever I want to be found on the internet. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We will see you next week right here on your favorite podcast feed. Until then, Janchi Heyo.
Bye.